Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Stephanie, and I'm with South Shore Clean Cities, and we work with NIRPC. And I just wanted to thank you all for joining us today for the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission's 2040 Plan and Status of Implementation Projects webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website and YouTube page after the presentation. We have three presenters today. Our first is Steve Strain, who is the Deputy Director of Planning for NIRPC and the Deputy Director and Director of Planning for NIRPC. Then we have Gabrielle Bakunis, who is NIRPC's Long Range Planner. Then we'll finish it up with Kathy Luther, who is the Director of Environmental Planning. If you have any questions during the presentation or have any audio issues, please type them in the question box or the little hand to raise your hand, and we'll get to them after the webinar. But for now, Steve, you can take it away, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, and good afternoon, everyone. We're here at the NIRPC office in Portage, Indiana, just a couple of miles from one of our Great Lakes, Lake Michigan. Let's go to the next slide, and here's the agenda. Just a brief what is NIRPC? We're going to give an overview of our 2040 regional plan, and then Gabrielle will discuss land use planning and something called Creating Livable Communities, followed by an update of the Marquette Plan. What is NIRPC? Well, we were a two-county regional planning commission that was formed in late 1966, and we added LaPorte County in 1979. So we're both a council of governments now and also the designated metropolitan planning organization for the three counties in Northwest Indiana that border Lake Michigan: Lake County, Porter County, and LaPorte County. We are one of 410 metropolitan planning organizations, or MPOs, in the country, 14 of which are in Indiana, and we all have a different kind of governance and configuration, but that would be a webinar for another day. Here's a map and some facts about where we live and work. 41 cities and towns. That's a little unusual. I think it's certainly the largest number of towns in the metropolitan planning organization in Indiana. So we sometimes consider ourselves the largest MPO, even though by population the Indianapolis metropolitan area is larger. And there you see our 750,000 population counted in 2010. What we're really proud of are the 45 miles of Lake Michigan shoreline, and so much of what we do, and certainly the presentation that Kathy Luther will give will center on the shoreline of Lake Michigan. We're also very close to the city of Chicago, and if Indiana is the crossroads of America, clearly Northwest Indiana is really the best example of the kind of crossroads that there are throughout the state. And we have many interstates, state highways, and interstates, and also are blessed with Lake Michigan. As a metropolitan planning organization, NIRPC has developed numerous transportation plans over its nearly 50 years that we've existed. Because as an MPO, we are required by federal regulation to develop a long-range transportation plan with at least a 20-year horizon, and accompanying that, a short-range 3 to 5 year program called a Transportation Improvement Program. That's the official list of projects for which money has been identified, and projects that will really help to implement the long-range plan. In addition to that, another major document, a product of our planning process, is the work program, which is just what it says. It's a program of who does what and how much that costs here at NIRPC. And in fact, we've expanded our work program to include not only the required transportation projects, transportation planning and programming that we do, but other things we do as a council of government. So it's really a more comprehensive work program. In late 2007, our then new executive director, John Swanson, really helped our commission members and staff conceive of the idea of a comprehensive regional plan. It was something that was on our minds for some time because we knew that we needed to plan for more than just the future of transportation in this region. We know that obviously transportation is linked with land use and economic development and the environment. And he really spearheaded the effort to come up with a comprehensive plan for the region, beyond but inclusive of the transportation elements of that plan. We garnered support for a major undertaking that took about 2.5 years to build. We developed our plan over the course of that 2.5 years. It really began with the work of a steering committee and the hiring of a consultant team who, along with the staff, spent countless hours preparing for a grand kickoff. It had been originally scheduled for the fall of 2008, but as some things go in planning, there were some delays, so we crossed our fingers and held it on a very cold, snowy, and a very cold, snowy December morning, where 500 people from around our 3-county region participated in a planning exercise called the Forum on the Future of Northwest Indiana. And what they did really resulted in the vision for a plan, and there's been widespread support for this vision for a more vibrant, revitalized, accessible, and united region. And really everything in the comprehensive plan in some way supports that vision. As important as that vision is, there are principles. And there's a declining population and jobs in some of the older communities that border Lake Michigan, namely Gary, Hammond, East Chicago, and Michigan City. So there's really a concentrated effort to revitalize those communities. So supporting urban reinvestment is really central to our plan. And we see here a map of really the final concept for the vision of the plan that would continue to concentrate development in large and medium and small communities. It would focus revitalization in the older communities to the north, provide some emphasis to growth and infill in the central parts of Lake County, which is our county to the west, and in Porter County, our central county. But really the vast majority of our region, to some people surprisingly, is still very, very green with some open space and agriculture. And to continue the principles of our plan, environmental justice, which really means a more inclusive way of planning for and with people in what we call environmental justice communities, concentrations of minority and impoverished areas. So it was important for us to identify those. Including those people in the planning process and making sure that our plan really dealt with those concentrations of populations was really important to our plan. Protecting the natural resources, to some people that goes without saying, but it's so important in our area because there are many industries to the north, and there's been really a lessening of the dunes that had existed over centuries, over thousands of years. So it's important for our region to understand its assets, its green infrastructure. There had been some information available, and really our commission really pulled that together and really added a lot of information to that, so that there is so much more now about our ecological assets, water resources, and everything else that you would consider green. Another principle important to our long-range comprehensive plan was the integration, the connection of transportation and land use. So often there's a disconnect between those two. You know, what comes first, the development or transportation? We're given 41 communities in 3 counties. Really, they're in a way kind of doing their own thing, and we really wanted a better understanding of the connection between transportation and land use. Transit-oriented development is important in our region, maybe less so than in other regions because we don't really have a connected regional system of public transportation. We do have the South Shore Railroad that connects us to downtown Chicago, but this is a concept that is front and center in our long-range plan. So these are the chapters in our comprehensive regional plan: growth and conservation, transportation, of course, environment and green infrastructure, human and economic resources, and stewardship and governance. It's not really a prediction, but because our plan is a visionary plan, there is I would say, a hope and an expectation that our region could add up to 170,000 people and 80,000 new jobs by the year 2040. So if the vision is followed, if communities grow and develop according to the regional vision, we think that these are some realistic numbers. However, the region's transportation network could become overburdened, and we really need a better system of public transportation. And there you see some of the other findings. Existing land supply does meet the growth needs and demands through 2040, so we have plenty of land to develop, but to keep much of that green. And now we go to Creating Livable Communities. Gabrielle.
Yes, thank you, Steve. My name is Gabrielle Vacunas, and I'm just going to present on 2 new initiatives and programs that we created to implement the recommendations and strategies of the 2040 plan. The 2040 plan recommends encouraging livability and accessibility. And so during the process of the plan, each of the communities identified a dot on the map as their livable center. And so then NIRPC created the Livable Centers Initiative in order to further define that boundary of each of the community's livable centers. In order to take that step further and implement the plan, NIRPC added 2 new programs: the Livable Centers Initiative and the Creating Livable Communities Funding Program to enhance the livability in the livable centers. To get a better understanding of the concept of livable centers, these centers cluster many different land uses in a compact area that allows people the opportunity to accomplish various activities without using a car. It's also a model to concentrate future growth within a defined perimeter around downtown and neighborhood areas. A little bit more about what a livable center is. They makes it easy for people to reach many different destinations, either by foot, by transit, by bike, by car. It also focuses on good connectivity, as you can see in the little diagrams on the side, where Livable Centers focuses more on the bottom concept of easy access and a better grid system, rather than the upper diagram where there's more of a poor connectivity. So again, Livable Centers concentrates many uses with good pedestrian network. Specific elements of what defines the livable centers include compact mixed-use development, having short block lengths, having many different access options, having different activities both during the night and during the day, and also making sure there's a jobs and housing balance, that there are transit stops and amenities, there's a traditional street grid, and also elements of livable centers include just using the existing infrastructure. So to begin our process, each of our 41 communities were classified as either a small, medium, large, or metro center. And this is based on their population and the activity. And this typology kind of illustrates the different characteristics and population. The next step was to define the boundaries of the livable centers. And so NIRPC first did a preliminary analysis of the region as a whole using GIS mapping. And so we mapped the different block sizes, the street grid, the density of population, housing, and employment, and also the proximity of key features such as the civic halls, schools, transit. And then we also looked at the different communities' comprehensive plans and their zoning ordinance, especially if they included any mixed-use or transit-oriented development considerations. After that, we met with each of the communities to discuss what plans they have for the future, also showed them this preliminary analysis, and together we were able to draw a geographic boundary for each of the communities' livable center. And what resulted was this final map of the livable centers. The bright pink are the main centers, and so we have 40 main centers, and the light purple are the neighborhood centers. And so many communities also identified neighborhood centers. They felt that there was activity in those areas that were more than just their main center. We also mapped areas that were within a half-mile walking distance from either a bus or transit area or stop. NIRPC then produced a report that features each of the community and its livable center. This report is available on our website to get a little bit more detail on it, so you can visit us at nirpc.org and then go to the Creating Livable Communities report. Just an example of what's included in the report is the livable center by size and street grid. Kind of again goes back to the different sizes of the center and which community, what size they are, and their street pattern. The report also provides characteristics for each of the centers in terms of design principles, some of the scale recommendations, and again, this is for each of the different centers. So small, medium, large, and metro each have their own characteristics. And here is just an example of one of the communities and one of their analysis of how detailed we provide each of the livable centers. So the second step is that we developed the Creating Livable Communities funding program in order to fund projects within those identified livable centers and transit areas for our 40 communities. So the purpose of the Creating Livable Communities, or known as the CLC, funding is to support community-based transportation and land use projects that bring vitality to downtown areas, neighborhoods, station areas, commercial cores, and transit corridors, specifically in the livable centers areas. The CLC allows NIRPC to place transportation dollars to our planning efforts, and $400,000 was identified for the next 2 years using Surface Transportation Program, or STP funding, to fund communities to enhance their livable communities in both Lake and Porter counties. A little bit more of an overview of the CLC grant. It supports projects that are guided by the principles of livability and placemaking, and also promotes investment and redevelopment in places where people already live and work, and to create an improved working and living environment that's supported by many different travel choices. The eligibility to receive this grant and this funding are local governments and nonprofit organizations, and these projects must be located within the Livable Center's map that was identified or in the transit area map. And the different types of grants, they fund planning projects or pre-development plans that revitalize the existing centers, downtowns, neighborhoods, different transit stops, corridors, transit-oriented development ordinance, but it all must be located within the livable center or the transit area. And NIRPC was pleased to, for the first round, to be able to award 7 grants to the 7 following communities that you see on your screen. And these projects, they range from downtown master plans to corridor plans, streetscape improvement plans, as well as transit-oriented development plans. And this, again, was for the first round, which was just planning or pre-development plans. And so we are hoping for the next round to have enough money where we can fund construction projects. But again, for the first round, it was just planning and pre-development planning. So we are very excited with this new initiative and this new program.
I should interject here, too, that the STP money is, of course, primarily used to construct roads. So the highway stakeholders agreed to carving out a large portion of money for planning to help implement the comprehensive regional plan. So that's how much our comprehensive regional plan is thought of, to actually set aside construction money to begin to implement at least parts of it. So the Creating Livable Communities grant program clearly is in keeping with our vision of a more vibrant, revitalized, accessible, and united region. So are we ready to move on to the next?
Yes.
Okay.
So now we'll talk about another implementation project. So I'll hand it over to Kathy to talk about the Marquette Plan update.
Okay, I'm unmuted. This is Kathy Luther, and I think I'm going to be asking Gabby to advance the slides for me, but I'm going to talk about the Marquette Plan. Before we had a 2040 plan and before we had the Livable Centers program, there was the Marquette Plan, which in essence, in its goals and vision, is very similar in that it wants us to have a livable lakefront. Can you next? So the goals are similar to livable communities and the region. A livable live, work, and play, to have 70% of the lakeshore for public use, to, if possible, establish a 200-foot setback for new developments on the lakeshore so that the front lake frontage would be available for public use, and to have a continuous trail throughout Northwest Indiana that would connect folks all the way from the Illinois state line to the Michigan state line through our region. That continuous trail network is outlined and planned as the Marquette Greenway. So the area that the Marquette Plan covers is highlighted here. It's as it's presented forward, there will be a kind of a sub-area plan for Hammond, Whiting, East Chicago, West Gary Lakefront, and Central and East Gary, and Portage. Those were all presented in the initial Marquette Plan Phase 1, which was published in 2005. And then Phase 2 of the Marquette Plan was Portage, West Porter County, East Porter County, and LaPorte County. In our version, we will have one Marquette for the entire lakefront integrated. We are presenting Portage and Ogden Dunes together, and then presenting the Duneland communities together with a separate section on the national and state parks there. And then I believe we will be actually also splitting up LaPorte County into a Michigan City section and LaPorte County North section. So each of those zones will have a sub-area plan that supports the goals of the Marquette vision. Next. What are we doing to update the plan right now? So the Phase 2 was done in 2008. So it's clearly in the five-year or more time frame to update or beyond. Is we're consolidating the frameworks. The Marquette Plan originally had, each phase had slightly different language. It had a series of recommendations around themes. We have integrated those themes so that the two east and west ends will match with the same one. So there will be a theme around transportation and infrastructure improvements in the lakeshore area, a theme around public access, recreation, and tourism in the region, a theme around green infrastructure and environmental protection, around livable communities, around land revitalization and economic development, community coordination, and then a new framework will really build on one of the goals in the original Marquette Plan, which is really highlighting and featuring the culture and history of our region in the lakefront area. Next slide. So we'll talk about, in the context of each of these frameworks, progress towards the goals. So as you may recall, the goal for public access to the lakefront was that 75% of the lakefront might be available to the public. There's a lot of different things that public access could mean to different people. Some people, public access is being able to lay on the sand. For some folks, it's being able to swim or boat or kayak. For some folks, it may be just walking along a trail, being able to see the lake. We've highlighted here all the locations where you can access some way. You can look at the water or walk on a trail. We've also are going to discuss the access of the correlation between these sites and transit opportunities. Again, getting to that livability, can everybody access it, even people without vehicles? Next slide. Currently, our goal for the lakeshore is 75% of public access. We have almost 34 miles of public access right now, so we need to find access to about 9 more miles of the lakefront. It's kind of hard to envision how that will happen. And not all places will be all things. Not every place will be available to see, walk, swim, boat, and fish, but something should be available there. An example of how difficult this will be is presented when we start delving into opportunities at a State Line Energy facility, which is in North Hammond, right at the Illinois-Indiana state line. That facility is closed, and it is in the process of being deconstructed. So that's an opportunity, possibly to gain public access. So you can see we have 45 miles of shoreline. I got a lower number for accessible, but if we use all of the State Line Energy shoreline, that would add maybe a mile. If we only can use half of it for public access, that would add half a mile. And if we only get a little bit, I mean, so even that large facility on the lakefront that is opening up and some of it may remain in industrial use or utility use. So that's only a fraction. 1 mile is only a fraction of the 9.5 more that we need. So it's going to be a big challenge, but we are making progress. We have added miles since the initial Marquette Plan started with Portage Lakefront, additional shoreline in Whiting, and other locations. One of the other goals you recall was the state line to state line trail, which is approximately a 51.2 mile network as planned. Currently, about 1/3 of that greenway has actually been built, and there is an additional 14 miles that are funded and planned to be let by NDOT in the next 2 to 3 years. So that would put us at closer to 2/3. So that is one of the major Marquette goals that's having significant progress. Next slide. I mentioned the new layer that we were adding, which is the cultural and historic assets. Here we've highlighted actual National Register historic sites in the lakefront area, as well as National Register historic districts, which are in the light purple. Kind of those would tend to be whole neighborhoods or areas. In this discussion, we will have a series of recommendations of different ways to highlight these type of assets and how they can be a benefit to the community and what communities can do to preserve them. Some of them, you know, could be tourist attractions. Some of them could be redeveloped into other businesses. There are federal tax credits available for that. Oh, here's the list. How can a community have historic preservation? What does that mean? Some people think it means, oh, you can't do anything, and that's entirely not true. There's a lot of options and opportunities. How your historic buildings and assets can be economic development incentive, how you would set standards. Arts and Cultures District, Michigan City has a new arts district designated, and ways that can help with tourism economic development. Next slide. So as mentioned before, we're realigning the sub-areas, so there will be 9 sub-areas. Each sub-area in the Marquette update will include kind of the vision for that area. Will include what projects that were recommended in the previous Marquette phases are completed, which projects might be underway, future plans or projects that have been dreamed up for that area in the intervening years, what have been successes, what have been challenges, maybe projects that further study revealed to be lower priority or not feasible for physical reasons. Those type of things will be discussed in each sub-areas section. So this is an example of how the sub-areas will be presented. This is the Hammond sub-area, which with the highlight on that state line energy parcel that I mentioned. So there'll be one map showing where in that sub-area there's open space, where there's public access to the lakefront, where there's the community centers that were talked about in livable centers, and how people can get to the beach. And then there will be another map presenting specific Marquette projects that were mentioned in an earlier phase and how they are progressing. Next. And here is the next sub-area is the Whiting sub-area map. Whiting has, again, the local map where there's green space, where there's mixed use and livable areas, where there's access to the lake. Another map showing specific projects mentioned in Marquette and what their status is. And then, again, there's an inset blow-up of their lakefront park renovations that have happened over the past few years. Next slide. Next slide. In East Chicago, we're proposing kind of a substantial shift in their sub-area map. The previous East Chicago sub-area in the Marquette Phase 1 really focused on the canal. The canal at this point is not as much of the focus of the public access, as that is still largely an industrial use. We're shifting the focus to the East Chicago lakefront area, which is consistent with the Marquette Plan. They have RDA funding and a great plan to renovate their lakefront and make it much more accessible to their residents and visitors. So that is clearly called out. In the previous version, they didn't even have a piece of their lakefront displayed in Marquette. And then stretching that down to Roxana, where there's considerable environmental investment and opportunities for TOD. And the Gary West sub-area, more frequently called Buffington Harbor, which we're going to shift the map a little bit. We'll be tying the Marquette Plan in with the airport and Klein Avenue areas, and again, identifying what the land is planned to be used for and where there may be opportunities. Some of the plans in this particular area have changed from the local government point of view, so we'll be reflecting that in the sub-area update. Next slide. Next, okay. In the sub-area east is Miller. That's where there is quite a bit of activity right now in the city of Gary with their North End redevelopment plan. So we're going to highlight a lot of those efforts in that update, and especially highlight all the renovations and the great work that has happened in Marquette Park, both with the natural resources and the beach and the historic structures there. So that is a great example of how public access has been improved. It was already public access, but now it's much more comfortable and user-friendly. And improvements of walkability and destination there will increase access to that lakeshore. And then Porter County was not finished at the time of this presentation, but we are working diligently on that. Skipping ahead to LaPorte County, we have a lot of activity and projects in the Michigan City area. In particular, they have their new Gateway plan, strategic plan, which is kind of stitching together a lot of plans surrounding their downtown and their arts district and Washington Park and the Trail Creek watershed. So again, in here we'll be highlighting all the projects that have been completed and projects that are underway and some that are new since the last update or the last plan. So the next steps for the update are to complete the Porter County map, which is the one I did not show you, to do some additional green infrastructure discussion. We've added a substantial bit about watershed planning that it was touched upon in Phase 2 Marquette, the importance of watershed planning, and projects were recommended. That is one area where our region has made considerable progress. So we are going to highlight that in the green infrastructure and environmental protection framework, and additional projects and investments in habitat restoration that have occurred in both private and public land. We are editing the text of all the frameworks and sub areas and desktop publishing it to make a attractive document, and vetting these sub area maps with the local cities and towns as they are developed. We will then be coming out probably in the fall with, or late summer with a couple of public open houses on the final results, and working with the Regional Development Authority to build an interactive website for this Marquette Plan update. And that is, and this work has been done by NIRPC and the Indiana Landmarks, and the staff who've been assisting.
Back to the subject of the Comprehensive Regional Plan, it was adopted by our board in mid-2011, unanimously by our board in June of 11. And since then, you can see that much of our work has been in assisting communities and counties in implementing that plan. And it's worth mentioning that 2 years after it was adopted, it received the American Planning Association's Burnham Award for the best comprehensive plan in the country So we're proud of that, but we're especially proud of the support that the plan has had and the implementation that has taken place so far. Here's how we can be reached at NIRPC, and what else do we need to cover?
Do people have any questions or?
Oops, sorry, I was still muted. Yeah, if you have any questions, you can type them in the question box on your screen. But if not, you have all of their information, and you can review the information and maybe reach out to them afterwards. Any final thoughts from you all?
We mentioned that we're going to be, Steve, coming forward with public meetings or some meetings to update the transportation plan.
Yeah, because we're an MPO, we're required to update our transportation plan every 4 years. So that's coming up in mid-2015. I think most of the attention will be on the transportation portion of the comprehensive regional plan. We're not going to touch the vision statement or the principles. We're going to tweak it where it needs to be updated in other parts of the plan other than transportation. But again, the concentration is going to be on that part of the plan. We'll add some projects, but all in keeping with the vision, all in keeping with the goals and objectives, which I don't expect will be changing in this next update of the plan, which is due mid next year.
All right. Well, if anybody has any questions after the webinar, you have their contact information. You'll receive an email later on today or tomorrow with the recording of the webinar. And thank you all for joining us. And thanks, Steve, Gabby, and Kathy for presenting. And you all have a great day.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.